Today I'd like to talk about the China virus, and not the CCP virus in and of itself, but the actual phrase China virus. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I've seen a lot of discussion regarding the phrase online, but it's never something that's actually come up in my personal life. That is, until yesterday. I was attending a social gathering with an organization that I'm part of, and a few hours before this gathering, I talked to the leader, who happens to be a close personal friend of mine, and he mentioned a segment that he'd recently seen from John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, in which John Oliver talks about how the phrase China virus is problematic and it encourages Asian hate and racism and all that stuff.
Just last year, many were loudly warning that Trump calling COVID names like the China virus was likely to lead to a rise in violence against people of Asian descent, an argument that, at the time, not everyone seemed to find convincing. But there has to be an understanding that saying, I don't have a problem with calling it the China virus, is very much giving space for that hate to grow.
My friend specifically asked me to not wear a t-shirt that I own that has the picture that I'm going to use on the thumbnail for this video. And he didn't want me to use that t-shirt because he was worried that some of the new people at the organization were going to see it and assume that I was some sort of anti-Asian bigot for wearing that shirt. And so that's why I'd like to talk about it today. I have three main points to say on this topic, and the first one is that if you take away all of the other context, the assertion that using the phrase China virus is somehow racist is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, and I'm pretty sure anybody with lukewarm or higher IQ would be able to see through that claim for the bullshit that it really is. By now, we have, at least 6 different variations of the CCP virus. You have the South African variant, you have the British variant, you have a bunch of different variants, and in none of these cases, not even the South African case, is the phrase South African virus being presented as anything that's problematic in the slightest. You know, last time the world had a big pandemic, it was the Spanish flu. No one has ever claimed that that's racist, because it's fucking not. Apparently, the only time it becomes problematic, the only times it becomes racist, is when you say China virus. Why is that? And that brings me to the second point that I want to address. This is a marvelous piece of propaganda, really, from the Chinese Communist Party. Since the start of the pandemic, they have done their damnedest to make sure that no one is blaming them for the outbreak. They've tried blaming other countries. They've said that, maybe the virus came from food imports from Italy, or, hey, maybe it was even the US Army that smuggled it into China, and then they were the ones who unleashed it. They've been working very hard to obscure the fact that the CCP is directly responsible for this pandemic. And I'm not talking about, it doesn't really matter whether you believe that the virus originally came from a lab or whether it came from the wet food market. That's totally irrelevant to the point that I'm making here. We know it is confirmed through leaked documents and media reports. You can spend 5 minutes on Google and you'll be able to verify what I'm about to say. And that's that prior to the outbreak starting, prior to the celebration of the Chinese New Year's in Wuhan, Xi Jinping and other top-level CCP officials knew that the virus was circulating amongst the population. They decided to keep it down low, they decided to hush it up, and what's more, they decided to close domestic flights to and from Wuhan immediately after this period, while still allowing international flights. They then spread false information to the World Health Organization about there being no evidence of human-to-human transmission of the virus during a period that the CCP knew that this was not the case. Because of this early cover-up, what could have been just a local outbreak actually became a global pandemic. And the CCP has been trying desperately since to make sure that nobody associates the Wu flu, the CCP virus, with the CCP itself. And getting your panties in a twist about somebody using the phrase China virus plays directly into their hands. The third point that I'd like to discuss is this notion of Asian hatred in the context of American politics. If you take a look at the past, 10 to 20 years, who is it that's really discriminating against Asians in America? It's not Trump, it's not the MAGA crowd, it's the Democrats. But this isn't a point that you're going to hear discussed by partisan hacks like John Oliver. It's been well known now for over a decade that really ultra-progressive schools in America discriminate against Asian Americans on the basis of their race. Take a look at these lawsuits. Lawsuit challenges new administration's policy at elite VA school. Eric Wilcox, a lawyer with the Pacific Legal Foundation, said at a press conference Wednesday that the policies themselves are discriminatory, but the intent is made more clear by statements from board members who said they want the changes to result in a student body with a racial makeup that matches the county's demographics. DOJ sues Yale for allegedly discriminating against Asian Americans. In a complaint filed Thursday, the department charged that Yale's race discrimination includes imposing undue and unlawful penalties on racially disfavored applicants, including in particular most Asian and white applicants. The lawsuit follows a 2-year civil rights investigation into the Ivy League institution in response to a complaint by Asian American groups, which found that race was a factor in hundreds of admissions decisions each year. Supreme Court may finally intervene in Asian discrimination suit against Harvard. And apart from the schooling, you even have this. Democrats defeat GOP effort to add college admissions discrimination to Asian hate crime bill. Before passing legislation that aims to curb hate crimes against Asian and Pacific Island Americans, Senate Democrats shot down an attempt by Republicans to loop in a conservative priority that had been backed by the Trump administration: discrimination against Asian Americans in college admissions. Why has ending racial discrimination in college become a partisan issue? Well, it's because modern Democrats are the real racists. They believe things like the following.
If you're a progressive Democrat in modern America, you believe in racial quotas. You believe in them to redress what you perceive as past injustices and discrimination.
Now, of course, not all Democrats believe this, but the vocal ones, the ones that sit in power, the ones that pass laws, they actually believe this. And if you take a look at the statistics on the increase in, anti-Asian hate crimes that have been going on, if you look at the perpetrators, the vast majority of them are black. That's, again, something that John Oliver is not going to discuss because, again, he belongs to the sort of radical Democrat that believe the sentiment echoed in this article. White supremacy is the root of all race-related violence in the U.S. The point I've made through all of those experiences is that anti-Asian racism has the same source as anti-black racism: white supremacy. So when a black person attacks an Asian person, the encounter is fueled perhaps by racism, but very specifically by white supremacy. White supremacy does not require a white person to perpetuate it. I'm going to conclude this segment with a story that I think really encapsulates what it is I'm trying to convey in this video. And I was speaking to a friend who said that not all people who vote for Donald Trump are racist, but all people who are racist vote for Donald Trump. And I simply pointed out to him that no, that's not the case. You have a bunch of racists who hate white people, and they all vote for Democrats. But not only do they hate white people, they hate Asians as well. So if you're really concerned about stopping hate in America, you really shouldn't be voting for the Democrats.